arguments was very like limited over the fighting, if that makes sense. So like the arguments would just overtakes what the good memory would have been if the argument wasn't in place, if that makes sense.
And is that something you observed between your parents?
Yeah.
Now, how about your relationship with your dad? Did you see some changes with your relationship with your dad in the few weeks?
Until he got sober.
What do you mean until he got sober?
Once he started getting sober is when I was able to like. My whole life I had a fear of my dad. So.
And did that change when he got sober? Is that a yes? You just have to answer out loud.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. And so did you find yourself coming closer with him at that time when he was sober?
Yeah, we were talking more.
Now, in the weeks prior to his death, did you still hear and see fighting in the household?
Following up?
Yeah, leading up.
Yeah.
And did you see kind of your father either after a fight happened or kind of in the midst of one, what he would do during those fights?
Smoke.
And where would he do that?
Side door. So if there's only 2 doors we enter from the house, front door, side door.
Okay, but would it be inside or outside the house?
Outside.
And so where would your mom be when he would be outside smoking a cigarette?
If she wasn't out there with him, in the house somewhere. I mean, mostly in her room, just trying to stay away from it, you know?
When you would hear, excuse me, the fighting between your mom and dad, could you hear what they were fighting about?
I mean, like when I would have to, like just like a passing ear, and it'd just be like the same record, like same broken record type of situation. Just a whole lot of just trying to figure things out. It's what it sounded like, you know.
And when you say trying to figure things out, was there any particular thing that your parents were trying to figure?
The affair.
You mentioned your dad getting sober. Do you remember when that happened, that he stopped drinking?
I know he had his 1-year chip, I believe. Possibly 2 years, I'm not sure.
Okay. When he would drink, what would he drink?
I mean, depends, but majority probably would be Bud Light.
And what were your observations of him when he would be drinking?
Didn't want to be messed with.
Okay. So does that mean he would be by himself?
Majority of times. Yeah.
Okay. And would he do it in the house or someplace else?
Inside the house, and if he had to go outside, there'd be some stash somewhere for him to drink on. So,
did you see a change in his interaction with the family when he became sober?
Yeah. He was like a lot more open, it felt like, or seemed like. But like, it seemed like his anger wasn't as bad as before.
At any point, Angel, did you see these arguments with your mom and dad, or hear the arguments with your mom and dad become more than just a verbal yelling back and forth?
Like through any of them, or just like, what do you?
Well, from the period of time from 2018, after your family learned about the affair, till up until the time of his death in January of 2021, did you ever see anything physical between the two of them.
Restate my objection, Your Honor.
I know your objection for the record.
Can I still answer?
Yeah, just a yes or no.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah. Between 2018, after the family was aware of the affair, up until January of 2021, when your father passed away, did you see any physical interactions between the two of them?
I don't think so. Not in that time period. Maybe beforehand, but.
If we may approach sidebar briefly.
Yes. So, jurors, from time to time, I will give you mid-trial instructions, and this is the first time that I'm doing that. Let's see if I can get rid of this. I'll wait and do that one. Later day. You are about to hear evidence concerning certain encounters that are alleged to have occurred involving the defendant. It may include involving the defendant in her home, and that this witness, I believe, observed before the incidents which are the subject of the allegations in this case. This evidence is introduced to show a nature of the relationship between the defendant and the complaining witness, not the complaining witness, but here the victim, and insofar as it might bear on the issue of possible motive and the defendant's intent in this case. Like all evidence, it's up to you to decide whether you believe it or you do not, and to decide what weight that evidence should be given. This evidence is not introduced to show that the defendant had a bad character or a propensity to commit crimes, violent acts. You may not consider the evidence for those purposes. The defendant is not charged with committing any crimes other than the charges contained in the two indictments that I told you about earlier in the day. You may not consider this conduct as a substitution for proof that the defendant committed the crimes charged, nor may you consider it as proof that the defendant has a criminal propensity or a bad character. You may consider such evidence solely on the limited issue of the defendant's state of mind, motive, and intent with respect to the indictments in this case. You may not consider this evidence for any other purpose. Specifically, you may not use it to conclude that if the defendant committed these other acts, that she was more likely to have committed the crimes charged in the indictment. You may proceed.
Thank you. Angel, do you recall any particular incidents or arguments between your mom and dad where there was a concern about a weapon that was being used or that was furnished at some point?
Towards each other? Or? Well,
just in terms of an argument ensuing and a weapon or an instrument.
there was, I mean, the quote that gets thrown around with me stopping my mother from poking herself with a knife.
So if I can just kind of maybe ask you a little bit more about that incident, but so we're talking about the same incident. Do you know about when that incident happened that you observed your mom with a knife?
Yeah. Do you want me to elaborate? Or
If you can recall about when that occurred.
I came home from work. I can't remember if I got called out early or if it was just right when I got out. My brother got in a fight with my parents, I guess. I came home early, or like I said, right on time or something. But came home, went upstairs. They're in their room. Things are broken. I asked what's going on. It was, once again, the affair was the situation of, well, what got brought up to me. And then I shared my 2 cents, like, excuse my...
Can we be a little bit careful here?
Yes. Can we have a new question? The question that the witness is now answering has not been answered. Why don't we go back to when?
Well, I was leading up to the when.
There's no question before you, sir, right now, Madam Prosecutor.
Okay.
When?
Let me just ask you a few more questions, okay, and maybe a little bit of a different way. As far as the time frame, what time of year this was, or in what year? Do you remember when that was?
No.
Okay. And you indicated that you came home and Michael was in the home.
Which one?
Michael Jr., I'm sorry. Little Michael.
Wasn't at the home. No.
Okay, so when you came home, he wasn't at the home?
No.
Who was at the home when you came home?
My dad and father, or dad and mom.
Okay. And were they arguing at that time?
It seemed like, I mean, things were broken, and I walk in the room and it's just just like deer caught in headlights type of situation. But they were just face to face to each other, and then I walk in the room and eyes on me. And then I ask what happened.
And you made observations of the room or the area or the house when you came home, right? Where you saw the broken mirror?
Like, yeah.
Okay. And so what happened next when you saw your parents in the room and kind of things broken?
Conversation goes south.
Who's having the conversation? You and your parents?
Yeah, like all 3 of us.
Okay. And so without saying what the conversation was, what happened next as far as what people did?
So I noticed my mom got like kind of hysterical in a way. And I worried. And during the time too, she was going through her situation with I'm going to call it the affairist, or the person who he did the affair with.
Okay.
So my concern was stop her before she does something like that again, right? So she goes downstairs, like hysterical. I worry, follow her. Next thing I know, she grabs the kitchen knife next to the sink and Japanese like style, like about to plunge herself with it. And
just sorry to stop you, but for purposes of the record, because you're gesturing, and we're recording and creating a record of everything. When you say Japanese style, and you kind of held, but as far as what you were gesturing, she did. You had your hands together and you were gesturing towards your stomach. Did she have something in her hands at that time?
Okay. Like a steak knife, like the ones you'd cut like an onion with or something, you know, like those. Sorry. Good.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Yeah, the ones can I draw it out?
Well, is it like a knife you cut a steak with, or a knife with a bigger blade?
Bigger blade.
Okay.
Not a butcher knife, but big blade.
Okay. And so when you saw her do this with the knife to herself, where was your dad?
Pretty much following me. Like as
in the kitchen as well?
after I called him in, yeah.
And so what did you and your father do when you saw your mom make that gesture?
I grabbed the knife, stopping her from hurting herself, and then I called my dad over to help me, screaming. Like,
were you, the two of you, able to get the knife away?
yeah.
And what was your mom's demeanor during that time period? How was she behaving?
Frantic.
And what was your dad's demeanor? What was he doing?
Just trying to do what he did every day, just deal with it. I mean.
And just to kind of circle back to when this might have happened, do you remember if Michael Jr., little Michael, was living in the house at that time, or is it some point after he moved out where this incident happened?
I don't remember that.
Do you remember, well, so you mentioned a girlfriend a little while ago,
Yeah.
or an ex-girlfriend. What's your ex-girlfriend's name?
Katrina.
And did Katrina live with your family for a period of time during the time period we're talking about?
Yeah.
Was Katrina living in the home at the time that this incident happened?
That's the trouble I have remembering if we were at her house during the time or if we're at my house during the time. That's the only issue I have with all this going on.
But would she often stay with you?
She would, yeah. If we were going to go anywhere, it would have been either there at her house or my house. But yeah, she would.